Adam is from just up the road in Goshen, Indiana, where he lives with his wife and son, and is also an ordained minister in the Mennonite Church USA. Many recent hymns and choral arrangements contain Adam's hymns, which he began writing in seminary. In 2004, he was named the Lovelace Scholar by the Hymn Society of the United States and Canada, and he served 3 years on the Society Executive Committee. So let's give Adam a nice warm welcome.
Thank you. I wish I had half the energy that Chris does on a good day, and today's not a great day for my voice because I've just come off of a cold, but if my voice gives out, that just means we get to go to dinner early. So I think in some ways I was billed as a contrast to what you just heard, but I hope you won't come away from my time thinking that. I hope that you see the synergy and the connections that we can make. I'm supposed to represent tradition, but what I do is write new things. So there's creativity and tradition joined together in what I do too. I may not look to you like a hymn writer. Of course, how many of you ever imagined what does a hymn writer look like? But when I started writing hymns, I wasn't quite what I had imagined either. I started writing hymns just after my 24th birthday. And not too long after that, I went to my first meeting of the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada. That was the first time I met your own Nancy. And when I was there, an octogenarian hymn writer told me, not knowing that I was writing hymns too, told me that she thought that you really have to have life experience to write hymns, and therefore you should wait till you're retired. I didn't tell her what I'd been doing, and I also didn't mention that Charles Wesley started writing when he was in his early 30s, or that Isaac Watts started writing when he was 7. I wrote my first hymn in seminary. My first seminary class was taught by Rebecca Slough, who also has connections here. It was a class called Congregational Song Practices Past and Present, Tradition and Creativity Joined Together. One of the assignments was to take no more than 30 minutes and sit down and try to paraphrase a psalm. Now, I had been working for several years trying to compose, trying to write hymn tunes and other kinds of choral music. I was a composition major in college, and I had some stuff that was okay, but never anything that even got me very excited. And so when I had this assignment, sit down for 30 minutes and write a paraphrase of a hymn, Rebecca pointed out to me that what I came up with in those 30 minutes were better than anything else I had shown her in terms of tunes. It was a little bit of a humbling experience. Something I'd been working on hard for a long time wasn't working, and here was this new craft that I was just diving into that I showed some real promise on. After I wrote that first text, it was like the floodgates were opened, and within a year I'd written 30 more hymn texts. So let's start off by singing. If you could open up go to page 6. We're going to sing these words, but we're not going to use the tune printed there, just to be confusing. The tune we're going to use, I hope, will be familiar to many of you. This is a Mennonite holster, by the way. Da 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 da. Do you know that tune? We'll sing that with "The Church of Christ Cannot Be Bound." The Church of Christ cannot be bound by walls of wood or stone, where charity and love are found. There can the Church be known. True faith will open up the door and step into the street. True service will seek out the poor. True evangelical faith cannot lie dormant. It clothes the naked, feeds the hungry, it comforts the sorrowful, it shelters the destitute, it serves those that harm it, it binds up that which is wounded. That's probably the most famous quote from Menno Simons. What we just did here, and what I just heard from you, is my vision of the body of Christ. It's the voice of the congregation joined together, all of its varied parts contributing something to a whole that's greater than the sum of its individual components. That joining together, that combined voice, that resounding sound, that to me is the body of Christ. That to me is a sacramental experience, and that is where I feel the Spirit of God moving. And that's what I wanted to dive into, the voice of the congregation. What I saw was, as I started writing, was that Mennonites sing. We really sing. We sing like that every Sunday. We sing, a lot of us sing a cappella a lot of the time, and a lot of us sing in parts a lot of the time. But what we sing comes from everywhere but Mennonites. If you look through the hymnal that's in your racks there, you'll see hymns by Baptists and hymns by Presbyterians and hymns by Methodists, and even a lot of hymns by folks from the Church of the Brethren. But very, very few by Mennonites. Mennonites did not have a practice of creating their own congregational song. And I wondered why that was, and I wondered what could I do about that with the arrogance of a 24-year-old. I thought, I can fix this. So really what shapes Mennonite faith in song is the process of editing the hymnals rather than the creating of the works that go into it. The people who edit the hymnals, like Nancy, are the people who decide what theology is presented to congregations to sing, what theology will seep into them and inform their very beings and their consciousness of who God is, who Christ is, who the Spirit is. So when I started writing, I thought, I'm writing for Mennonites, and I want to bring Mennonite theology to Mennonite singing, and so therefore I'm going to write things that can be sung Menno style, a cappella, 4-part harmony, and reflecting Anabaptist and Mennonite concerns. Could you turn to number 4? If you would just give us the last line of it, and we'll jump in singing. Come join in Mary's prophet song, number 4. wrote that in 2005 in December. Many of you might remember that around that time, several workers with Christian peacemaker teams were taken hostage in Iraq. And I wrote this as a prayer for them and a prayer for peace in Iraq. So you can see some of my Mennonite theology coming through in here. My Anabaptist, somebody called it hermeneutical underwear when you really show your beliefs in what you're writing. My theology is incarnational, it's embodied, it's derived from the idea that God became incarnate in Christ and came among us, and Christ is still incarnate in us. We are the body of God in the world, and we act as God's hands in the world. So, I'm a hymn writer. Those are very hymn-like hymns. What makes a hymn a hymn? What does a hymn do? In the most technical sense, a hymn is actually just the words. It's words intended to be sung in praise of God. That's sort of a classical definition. So technically, that includes all musical genres. Anything intended to be sung can be a hymn. But I like a little bit narrower definition, and at least as it applies to the English language, I think hymnody entails a level of structure that's often not found in other genres of song, and often not found in some other genres of congregational song. And I would argue that the structures of hymnody make hymns fundamentally more congregational than some other structures that are available. But I'm going to argue as we go along that those structures can be applied to any genre of song, so we'll get there. So for me, the structures that work for hymns are a meter, a regular pulse of syllables that matches exactly stanza to stanza. Each musical line has exactly the same number of notes, exactly the same number of text syllables, and you sing those repeatedly. You come back to the same pattern, so there's a predictable pattern to follow. There's a framework that you can follow as you're singing. Generally, hymns have rhyme, and that's another roadmap that you can follow as you're singing, another aspect of predictability that guides you through the hymn. And hymns also often have other poetic or rhetorical devices like alliteration. So these elements allow us to go deep into Scripture and into theology, but in a very memorable way. Come Join in Mary's Prophet Song has a lot of words, but there are some phrases that if you sing that hymn a few times, you're going to remember them. And I hope you'll remember Not So Mild. I'm really proud of that one. And also Join with Our Enemies to sing War's Requiem. I hope you'll remember that one too. I'm pretty proud of those. Mennonites aren't supposed to be proud, but I'm half Presbyterian, so. So hymns have a capacity because of these structures to sink into us, to become a part of us, to become a part of our memories in ways that are really surprising, I think. And this is true of nursery rhymes too. Partly it's because we learn them very early on, they become a part of us. But I want to tell you two very quick stories. I have an uncle who about 15 years ago had a massive stroke and has been recovering ever since, relearning language, relearning motion, everything from the ground up. Before he could speak, a speech therapist came into the room and said, "Craig, what's your name?" He couldn't say anything. "Craig, can you do this for me?" He couldn't respond with words. "Craig, sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat." Row, row, row your boat. That was still there. That lodged in a different part of the brain. And another quick story from just a few weeks ago. My aunt and uncle were in a car accident on Good Friday that immediately killed my uncle, and my aunt lingered for a couple of weeks before she died. They were on a cross-country trip, and the accident happened in Madison, Wisconsin. Their home was in Oregon. They were visiting relatives on their way. They were a few days away from our house where they were going to stay. Their destination was Pennsylvania. I realized when I got the call Saturday morning that I was the closest, close relative. There were second cousins and other nephews on the other side of the family that I didn't know, but I could get there. So I drove 4 hours that Saturday to be with my aunt in the hospital. And she was already mostly non-responsive. She wasn't gone yet. I mean, we could get some flutters out of her. She could open her eyes sometimes if we asked her to. She might squeeze your hand if you asked her to. But one of the times we were with her, I said to the second cousin and the other nephew who were in the room, we ought to sing for her. And so I sang, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And her thumb went like this in my palm. And I thought, oh, that's wishful thinking. I'm imagining things. But it felt good to me. So we left the room until the next checkup an hour later, and we all sent our updates to our families. And we came back to the room for her next neurological exam. And I said, oh, maybe we ought to do that again. And the nurse says, yes, do. Her blood pressure went down 10 points. There's something about voices. There's something about hymns. There's something about memory that these things stick with us and they shape us, and they can reach through a lot to get to a person. I need to stop talking so much. Number 12. Let's just sing one stanza of this. This might be a familiar tune, it might not, but after we sing the first stanza, I'll read the rest of it for you. And what kind of sheep would be so bold to shun the shepherd's care, when rod and staff protect the fold from lion, wolf, and bear? Why leave the peaceful field and creek for shadow-shaded lands? And will the sheep return to seek its loving shepherd's hands? Come, faithful shepherd, be my guide, and lead me safely home. Forgive the self-sufficient pride that causes me to roam. Then, with the wanderers and the strays that you have sought and found, contented, I will spend my days where grace and peace abound. I just wanted to point out some of the tools in this. Hymn writing is a craft, and usually you don't want people to see the tricks you're using, but sometimes I think there are good cases to be made to be pretty obvious with the tricks. And one of those places is, why track the one that left the flock to try its luck alone? You don't usually get a tongue twister in a hymn, and I was really heavy-handed with the alliteration there. And that's because I think Jesus was being funny. I think this parable was meant to be ironic, a little bit sarcastic, and so I wanted to bring out that flavor, a little bit of that. So I think this is a hymn you can sing with a sparkle in your eyes. All right, so hymns allow for deep engagement with theological issues. They make interesting things available in very memorable form. And there's something that I think is very interesting that was brought up a little bit ago, that it's often the progressives that like traditional music and conservatives that like new music. I find that a very fascinating thing, and I find that to be true. We will sing some new stuff too, though. But I've wondered if that's because the hymn form, this way of conveying lots of theological information in a very compact, memorable form, lends itself to people that want to bring new things into the church, that want to bring new ideas. Think of Isaac Watts, think of Charles Wesley, and I think you can go down the line with the major hymn renaissances that have happened throughout history, right down to the current one that's been going on since the 1960s. It's the progressive wing of the church that feels that it has something new to say. Whereas on the conservative wing of the church, I wonder if it's, we have something beautiful to say, let's find new ways to say it. It's a different emphasis, right? So the musical is a new way of saying it, but we have something new to say, so sometimes they come together in really fun ways. So here's where I get to stretch some of you in some ways. Some of you won't be stretched at all, and that's fine. Some of you, I hope this bothers a little bit, and let's see what that does to us. Number 9, page 9. The God some may imagine. Let's sing. Let's sing until I tell you to stop, and then I'll read the rest. And why don't you play it all the way through, just so we get a sense of it. like to shake things up. So hymns give me the space and the tools and the craft to explore biblical images that haven't gotten used very much. The image of Christ as a mother hen. One of my favorite images also of God as the mother bear. Anyway, I could keep going, but I want to get to more of the songs. God is waiting at the table, number 7. That last line is one of my favorites from what I've written. And one I think I'll just read for you. Has a lovely tune, but it'll be quicker if I read, and then we can get to some of the stuff that I think ties together Chris's topic and mine. This is Questions That Shape Us on page 13. One of my friends commented to me once that her favorite feature of my hymns is that so many of them have question marks in them. One time I was flipping through my hymnal and I realized there was nothing, I don't think, in the hymnal worship book index under Q. And I thought, if I could write a good hymn starting with Q, people would notice that because it would really stand out in a hymnal index. So my last collection actually has 2 with Q. So, questions that shape us and help us discern, deepen our knowledge and faith as we learn. God, while we listen and strive for your will, teach us to wait for your breath, soft and still. Eager or anxious, distraught or content, we bring our worship, our praise, our lament. Tune our emotions to join in your song, answering your voice, its call sure and strong. Fill us with wonder and wake us to find grace that enlightens our heart and the mind. Guide us to glimpse your mysterious ways, stretching our wisdom and sparking our praise. And could you just play that last musical phrase? Sorry. Listen to what happens musically at the end of this tune. It ends on a musical question mark, which I love. You don't get to hear that very often. Page 15. Something I want to hear more out of from the contemporary praise and worship movement is lament. They've done a good job of drawing from the Psalms, but have often not allowed congregations to really dive into owning the feelings expressed in some of the darker Psalms. Hymns, again, I think, thanks to a tradition of using minor modalities and of different forms of text, sometimes give us room to do that in good ways. Let's see here. Could I have you hum this note for me? Sometimes our only song is weak. Our only sound is gasping breath. Sometimes it seems that God is speaking, while our brief lives are bound in death. Who hears the songs our sorrows swallow, and offers hope to calm our fears, when all our work seems frail and hollow, God keeps the prayers within our ears. Sing the second stanza with me and harmonize it however you want. If you want to hum or sing a harmony line or wail over top of it, whatever you think. Sometimes we crash the faintest harmony, our far off tune, our hearts know well. Sometimes we sense the Spirit coming, our song returns, our voices swell. The Spirit sings, though we are shaken, and Christ has shared our heartfelt cries. Restore our weary souls awakened to join God's song that never dies. Do hymns have to be hymns? Like I said, when I started writing, I thought I was writing for Mennonites to be able to sing Mennonite theology and Anabaptist theology. But what I found was that other people wanted to sing that too. And so before Mennonites have caught on to what I'm doing, Catholics and Presbyterians and Baptists and United Church of Canada and other people are figuring it out and are latching on to the themes of peace and the themes of justice that come through in what I enjoy writing. But they didn't necessarily want to sing in four-part a cappella harmony. I don't know why. I keep trying to convince them. So I've started to wonder, can the tools of hymn text craft, can they transcend musical style? Can these texts, these structures work for contemporary song? Go to number 18. I hate to stop it, but there's some other good ones too. Your church could totally rock that, couldn't they? I mean, that tune would fit right in across musical genres. Add guitar and bass and drums to that, it rocks. It's still pretty hymn-like. It's still a pretty hymn-like melody. It's very, very simple on the page, very straightforward, so let's get a little more complicated. Page 5. Same composer. This is a guy just a couple years older than me named Ben Brody, who teaches at Whitworth University in Spokane, Washington. It says, "Blessed are you." This is another one where I want you to notice that I'm being intentionally challenging and provocative, but in a very scriptural way. If we read the Beatitudes in Matthew, what does Jesus say? Blessed are you who are poor in spirit. If we go to Luke, blessed are you who are poor, period, the end. And then he even goes on to say, woe to you who are wealthy. So this is my shot at Luke's version of the Beatitudes. I think we can get into this with just the refrain first, and then we'll sing from the top. And then I let you go back to the blesseds in the third verse. So again, you can see this with a praise band, right? You can see the guitars, bass, drums would work totally well. I also want to point out the word contemporary is a really poor word to assign to one genre, because every single text I've written here is contemporary. And many of the tunes are too. In fact, one of the ones that I stuck into the more hymn-like category, The God Some May Imagine, that tune was written in 2015. So that's even more, it was written for this text, which was written in 2013. So contemporary, for me, anything newly written is contemporary. So I'm using that pretty loosely. I want to introduce to you a composer named Sally Ann Morris, who has become one of my best friends in the hymn world and is one of the finest composers working today. And we're going to do that by first looking at page 11. Sally has this wonderful habit of recognizing the need to step outside of traditional tonalities and keys. And so listen carefully to where she's changing keys on you here. They mean something whenever it happens. We'll have it played through once and then give a shot at singing it. And if you like to sing parts, try the parts. It's another theological theme not treated enough in traditional hymnody or contemporary anything, is the goodness of the body, that God created us good. Yeah, we fell, but God became incarnate and redeemed us. So our bodies are a good gift that we can offer back to God. Somebody asked me once if I had any hymns about sex, and I said, that one. Don't tell your kids. And I think we have time for one more, so I'm going to make it a big finish. Number 21. So this is another Sally Ann Morris tune. And I want to make sure we get this refrain nice and solid. So the women are going to be singing, come home, come home, come home to the city of God. Women sing that, and altos go ahead and take your part. It's very easy. Come home, come home, come home to the city of God. And you repeat that. And guys, we're going to echo the women, so the tenors they're going to go, come home, come home, come home, come home to the city of God. And basses, you're mostly just trudging along bass line. Come home, come home, come home to the city of God. Basses and tenors, try that for me. So we're going to have a minute. Come home, come home, come home, come home to the city of God. Come Yeah, so whenever we get to that section, just rock it out. Is our drummer still here? Is there somebody who'd be willing to pop up onto the djembe? Do you play, Chris? No? Anybody? Awesome, thank you. And let me give you a little bit of the rhythm on this opening section here. All right, so this opening part, the rhythm keeps repeating itself, so it's pretty easy to follow. The mountain of God stands above every nation. All cultures will gather to drink from its stream. The city, and it just keeps going up. It's very patterned, so you'll be able to just jump right in onto it. So we're going to start on 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, so our goal, you can sit down for a second. We're gonna, the roast beef and chicken and portobello mushrooms are waiting. They'll be warm, but I'm hot to just have a little time of questioning. Our goal was to give exposure to different kinds of styles. I think we've accomplished that already. And I appreciate, Adam, not only your musical skill, but your invitation to think theologically about why we sing what we sing. I've got a question, but I'm not going to go first. I'm going to let somebody else go first. Any questions for Adam?
Almost always words first, and I have several composers that I work with regularly, Sally Morris, Ben Brody, a guy named Colin Gibson who lives in New Zealand. So when I collaborate with him, sometimes I get emails from tomorrow, which I love. So most often I'll write something and I'll know when I start writing it whether I'm writing in a traditional meter that will use a traditional tune or if I'm writing something that needs something new. And if I know the theology needs a new voice to be sung in, I'll intentionally use a new meter and then invite a composer to come up with something for it. So.
Other questions? We have a mic coming for you.
Help us all hear you.
Luke.
Well, I really like to sing hymns, and I like the praise music and everything, but I wish that we would sing hymns more often in church. And I also really liked your hymns. I just want to say thanks.
I was going to say, I bet you didn't expect that last one out of the hymn guy, did you?
Anyone else? Yeah, Nate.
Just related to that first question you got. I wondered if when you're writing the words, if you have a tune in your head often or never, or how that works for you.
I find that I usually do better when I don't. And this is something I meant to get to that I didn't, was that for me personally, my best work is in collaboration. I mentioned already I worked at composing, but when I found people who could do tunes better than me, I let them do the tunes, right? And I find that when I have a tune in my head or when I'm trying to write to a new tune, the tune sort of lets me slide into things without thinking through the craft first, right? It sort of detracts from my attention to the form and to the shape that the words need to flow out in. I do my best when I'm really structured. It's almost like doing a Sudoku or a crossword puzzle that you know when you get the right word in the right place, or the right letter falls into place, or the right rhyme comes, that it just suddenly kind of clicks together. And I have that kind of brain that really works for me. So what I was getting at was that I really believe in collaboration. I feel like with a lot of congregational song, you can see that it was written either by a text writer who kind of does tunes or a tune writer who kind of does texts. And usually it's the latter one. Usually it's somebody who does great melodies and then the text is sort of inserted in to give people the melody. But I think if we can get people on both sides of the craft to work together, that's when we get really cool stuff.
So your songs are obviously drawn out of Scripture, from Psalms, the Gospels, Revelation. I mean, you can just pick the phrases right out. So do you find yourself spending particular time in particular biblical books, or do you try to, what time do you spend with Scripture? How do you spend in Scripture, and how does that then come out in your lyrics?
Not as much as I should, which I think is true of all of us, right? I have to give credit. For a while growing up, I was a Baptist, and we learned Scripture. And so a lot of these phrases that when I go to prepare the scriptural indexes for my collections, I have to figure out where it came from because I knew the phrase. The phrase is a part of me, but I never memorized the references very well. So I have to go to concordances and figure out what did I memorize back in Awana, back in 5th grade, that's now coming out in this hymn. But I think more recently, the scriptural engagement came, especially in seminary. There were a couple of courses I took explicitly because I wanted to write hymns on that topic. I audited a course called something on Job in the Arts or something like that, which was an awesome course. And my sole purpose was to write hymns on Job. And so there's a few Job hymns. I took a course on John, so I have a lot of John hymns. I love the Psalms, and that's what I keep coming back to over and over again. Often I'll go to the coffee shop in Goshen with my laptop and Robert Alter's translations of the Psalms, and that's my starting point.
it's more of a commentary than a question, but number 15, like, just first of all, that one really swept me off my feet. Sometimes our only song is weeping. Structurally, it's like there's Gregorian chant that I listen to sometimes at home, and I don't understand a word of Romanian, so it's good to have something in that same structure that's English. But the thing about it that I just felt I needed to say something was when we were singing that, I have like a natural inclination to be like, when I'm not in a good mood, I don't pray happy prayers. And so when somebody's like, hey, buck up, like, leave me alone. And so this song just kind of like reached down to where I was at mentally, and it's like, okay, now we can go on the uptake. And I don't get enough reverent Christian songs like that. Like, it's either all complaining or it's all sunshine and rainbows to me. And when I get something that hits me right where I'm at and then can lift me up in the same song, like, that's just, I know that's God working.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
How do you become published? Do you have to request that your hymns go in this hymnal? Do you have your own collection?
Yeah, if you check out the book tables. And my publisher was kind enough to provide these for you free, so you can take these. The selections in this are all drawn from 4 different collections, all of my texts, so 50 in each, so there's 200 altogether, all of them with their full accompaniments there. We didn't give you the accompaniments because we can't give you everything for free. There's also a recording there of my work with Sally Ann Morris that we recorded in Goshen with Goshenary musicians that I'm really proud of, so check that out too. Getting published, a lot of times hymnal committees will put out a call for submissions, and before I was with GIA, I would email a stack of files or send a stack of papers to whoever the committee was. Then once I was published, GIA took care of that. And getting in with GIA was just a matter of blind submission. I sent, I think, 12 things for them to look at and got an email back from Randy Sensmeyer, the composer of the God Some May Imagine tune, is the hymn editor there, so he emailed me and took me on. So.
I had a question. It may be 2, but let me ask one first. I appreciate your desire to help us look at the amplitude of Scripture and scriptural images. So we not only have celebration, we have lament. We not only have images of God's power, but also of God's nurturing capability. Is your goal to replace one with the other, or to supplement, have them supplement or complement one another?
Yeah, if you read The God Some May Imagine, it may look like replacement, and that's not necessarily what I intend. But I do think that we're in a time of sort of a necessary theological correction, that we have been so bombarded with God, the cosmic King Father, to the exclusion of any other possible images, that we really need to dive deep into new images for a while, I think. It would probably be a good practice for a church to, dare to use exclusively feminine pronouns for God for like a year, and just see how it feels. Then maybe saying God is He would mean something different when we come back to it, This is to say that I don't see it as necessary to include traditional images or the dominant images in my hymns, because we already have those hymns. We already have plenty of songs that do that and do that well, and I still love singing them. I'm writing new stuff though, so I'm using new images, new words.
So this may be more dinner conversation than we can pursue now, but as an academic, I hate it when people cite they refer to research or studies and then they can't tell you what the study was, but that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. Because I can't. But this was at a conference a couple of years ago, and it was a socio-economic comparison of different cultural contexts. And in cultural contexts where the here and now is pretty good, where life seems pretty fair and people are pretty well off, the hymnody and the images of God tend to focus more on the here. They tend to be more nurturing, sustaining, even we might say maternal or feminine images. But in socioeconomic conditions or cultural contexts where there's a lot of suffering and injustice, the images tend to be of God who comes to set things right, God who is powerful, and also more of an emphasis on the hereafter. If all our happiness is here, wow. So I just to sort of, I wonder how you might respond to that sort of cultural critique of different images.
Yeah, of course, the first response has to be, wow, that's a generalization. But I think it's a fair one, and I think it's fair to point out that's my socioeconomic location. I'm a straight white male ordained person from a fairly middle class background, educated, and I write from that perspective. And even though I wouldn't want to put it that way, that turns out to be the perspective I write for too. That's, I think, where I'm probably most readily received. So I think it makes sense to own my perspective and my background. But I think there can also be some very startling images of God and how God works. I think in particular of Latin American liberation theology, that some of the hymnody that's been produced there has a very strong social justice component to it that that works against that status quo. And I think that that's something that an Anabaptist voice can really latch onto and work into the equation.
Thank you, Adam, for driving the discussion to a deeper place, responding so graciously, and I look forward to animated dinner conversations. I'm going to ask Jabusa to come forward and offer a prayer for our dinner.
Sisters, brothers, pray with me. God, you are indeed good. And God, you have indeed met us here. And God, we thank you so much that your presence has been felt in palpable, tangible, visceral ways. And we trust, God, that you are not only here in the songs, but in the food and fellowship. And so, God, we thank you for the time that you have appointed for that purpose. And I do ask humbly and earnestly, God, that you would bless all those who have had a hand in preparing this meal, going the whole way back to the fields. And I ask, Lord, that you would bring righteousness and wholeness so that those who work and labor for our benefit may no longer be oppressed. I trust that it will be so, and so I declare it in Jesus' name. And the saints did say, Amen.